Trudy told most of my story already, so there's not a lot left to say. But I understood the object tonight was to talk about our careers, how we got to what we're doing, and maybe what makes our minds tick that's different than some other people. And I've always had a problem with going backwards. Marcia, who's here, knows this because she shares the same habit. And so once I decided to do something, I just do it. And I often do it without thinking it through too much, and that's worked for me most of the time, not all of the time. And I think that when I started First Dibs, it was an idea I concocted when I lived in San Francisco selling real estate. At a time I didn't even have to send an email. So, but I thought, you know, all these companies were doing .com in the late 90s, and I was in the brokerage business, which I love, and I'm still a real estate junkie. But I was selling houses to these kids that were taking the companies public and making so much money and moving from one-bedroom condos to these 10,000 square foot mansions. And I thought, I want to be on the other side of this transaction. You know? I want to be one of them. So the only way to do it was to be in the .com, and eBay had just gone public, and you know, and I was in San Francisco, so you're right there in the middle of it all. And the thing that you had to have to be in .com, I thought, was just a domain name. That's all you really needed. So I had a friend come over to my house in San Francisco, and I was fortunate to have this, truly, it's a whole other story, I won't go off track, but it was a spectacular house that I'd purchased years earlier when a neighborhood was just transitioning. And she came over, and I had this top floor that had this big terrace overlooking the city and the bay. And I said, we're not leaving until we come up with a domain name to buy, because I want to find a name, and I want to buy one. And I sort of knew what I wanted to do with it, but I wasn't really sure. And I don't know, I think it was a couple glasses of wine and maybe a puff of something later. We're being filmed. That finally, you know, something sort of surfaced. And I thought, well, First Dibs, I like that. You know, eBay is an auction site, and I like the idea of, I've always been a collector of good used things. That's what I like. It's my first love and passion, or antiques, and just anything good and used that you can resalvage and reuse. So I felt like I was going to do something with one of a kind. So that name worked for me. And then the next day, when I was so proud that I'd come up with this name, I thought, now I have to figure out how to buy it. I don't know, how do you buy a domain name? You know? So I called a couple of friends, and they said you have to go online, go to something called Network Solutions. I said, great, now how do I get online? So, I was not kidding. So then I finally won, this is 1998, and I bought this domain name, firstdibs.com, and so I was really excited that I was in the game. You know? So a couple of years went by, and I thought, well, I'm selling real estate at a time when, you know, it was just insane in San Francisco. You'd put a house on the market for $3 million, and 10 offers would come in, and all sealed bids, and someone would offer $10 million. You know, because these kids, they were so hard to get a house then. They didn't care. They just paid anything. They just wanted a house, and they were playing with funny money. So I realized with the market the way it was that I would never move on to another career unless I closed that chapter, because it's just too tempting when you're in that kind of business to give it up. So I had to figure out how to get off the drug. And so I made the decision to sell my house and move to France. And the first experience I attempted to have with email was actually a year earlier than this, when a client said, a friend of ours is moving here from London, and you know, you should work with them. You know, you're a great broker. And I said, great, but she only does email. I said, okay, give me your email address. So then I had to figure out, and I managed to get an email address, and I actually managed to write her an email and send it to her. And then she sent me one back, and I tried to reply, and I could never figure it out. I just couldn't get it to go back. So I said, oh, forget it. This isn't for me, and I gave it up. I thought, I don't need email. You know, what do you need email to do with .com anyway? So the funny thing is, these people, this woman I knew in the business said, I hear you're maybe going to sell your house. I have this client, you know, I'd like to show it to them. And I said, sure. So they came over and they looked at the house. She said, that's the woman I couldn't return the email to. Just, you know? And so she came and looked through my house, and they called me 30 minutes later and said, they want it, they'll take it. And I said, well, what are they offering? She said, full price. I said, come on, no one offers full price anymore. What's, you know, how much over are they going to go? You know? So she calls back 30 minutes, they'll give you $1 million more than you actually. I said, okay, I'll take it. So then I decided they wanted to buy some of the furniture. So you can't buy some of the furniture, it's all or nothing. What's it going to be? Because I'm thinking, I'm moving to Paris, what do I want this stuff for anyway? So literally, they bought it down to the sheets and glasses, and I had my first attempt at playing decorator, which I'm not, and I realized the value of using one because I made a lot of mistakes. But they did take everything, and I moved to Paris. I left the house with a suitcase, and I arrived to Paris, and I had an apartment on Rue Bonaparte, and a friend of mine came from San Francisco who used to live in France, and she said, I'm going to take you to the Paris flea market. I'd never been. So we went, and the first minute I laid eyes on it, I thought, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to put the Paris flea market online. How hard could that be? It just didn't seem, how hard could it be? Take some pictures, I'll learn that email thing eventually. So I asked someone had arranged for me to meet an accountant in France, so I had some advice while I was there. And this accountant, I said, you know anyone who does programming? I want to start this website. And he says, and I said, but they need to speak English because I didn't speak French. So he said, yeah, I know a client of ours' son does that. I said, great, give me his number. So I went and met him. He spoke perfect English, and I said, you're hired. And the guy still works for me 10 years later. But so he said, this is how you make a website. You have to tell me what you wanted to do. Okay. I spent about 10 hours the next day at Café Marley. If anyone's never been to Café Marley, it's at the Louvre overlooking the pyramid, which is a great spot to sit and think. So I took a pad of paper and I drew exactly what I thought you're supposed to do on this website and brought it, here's my website. So he began building, and as the technical side of it was built, I thought, well, that's great, but now it's chicken and the egg. We have to get product on the website, because who wants to go to a website without any product on it? So I thought, okay, so now the fun part, I have to go back to the Paris flea market and actually figure out how to get the French dealers interested in this concept. And I thought, this is the internet, it's America, they're going to all love it. They're just going to love it. So I brought a translator with me and a photographer, and we went and I had the translator explain to them, doing this website, it's for people in the US to buy our things, and they're all saying, we don't want to do that. We're just not really interested in putting our things online. So we go to the next booth and we change the story a little bit. And now we go next. Finally, we got it down to where we're just going to take some pictures and send them over the internet to some decorators in the United States, and they could swallow that. That worked. People were already doing that, taking pictures, right? So that was where we began. And we thought, well, we have to shoot a lot of inventory. We have to get all this product on the website before we launch it, because there has to be, if not hundreds and hundreds of things, at least, I wanted close to 1,000 things, so that, people have to search around. You can just search for one type of thing and then go to a dead end pretty quick and think this is a dead site. So as we began shooting, I realized, God, these dealers are going to get kind of tired of us shooting all these pictures because no one's buying anything because we don't have any customers. So after a couple of weeks of just shooting, I thought, well, we've got to figure out how to keep them interested. So of course, I sold the house in San Francisco furnished. I'm kind of, I have a bed. That's all I managed to get for my new apartment. So we would go from station to station at the market, and I would go knowing they had one thing I wanted to buy, and we'd shoot like 10 things, and then we'd call them the next day and say, oh, one of our clients is interested in that one table you have. So we did that for about 6 months. That was all the business we actually did. And after a couple of weeks of that, they knew everywhere we shot, we sold something. That this is magic. Everyone is shooting something sells. So we had dealers coming up to say, please come shoot at our. At first, they wanted to do is now they're, please come shoot with us. So, as a website, the mechanics were now done. Now we had enough images, but we hadn't figured out how payment was going to work, because all these credit card companies didn't want anything to do with people putting something on a credit card in Paris and having it flown to the US, and thinking chargeback city. No one wanted anything to do with it. So, you know what, let's just not use credit cards. We'll just trust people.